Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter. Of course, you can subscribe to the channel Let's Talk Boxing. There's been some exciting developments on Twitter, a bit of a Twitter beef. But I actually think, although it's very entertaining, there's a lot more to this, okay? Something that might be a little bit deeper. First and foremost, Audley Harrison has decided he wants to go after Carl the Cobra Froch. And it's not just Froch he wants to go after. He wants all that smoke with a whole bunch of people online. We're going to cover some of the things he's been saying. But we're also going to talk about how I believe that what he might be going through could be an insight into a psychological journey that somebody in Audley Harrison's position can go through when they've been through his type of experiences, and how Anthony Joshua might be somehow following some sort of a similar path. First and foremost, we'll start off with some of the tweets. Very entertaining. It will give you some context into what is going on in the mind of Audley Harrison. Now, there is one fighter that I'm going to put on blast today. Carl Froch became really disrespectful when I lost my strength, and it really got it twisted with me. I remember when I was Superman and we were at the Olympic qualifiers and he was basically crying on my shoulders. As the boxing management wanted him to box on in the finals after he qualified, I told him, no, don't do it. Save yourself for the Olympics event. And they pressured him, and I said, F them, don't do it. He started bawling for real. And I told him about sports psychology and what book he should read. He took the time and became a beast and learned to control his mindset. So do you think he should acknowledge that I helped mold his thinking? Instead, he starts disrespecting my name and forgot where he came from. When Ward tamed him, I was glad. And I'm not normally spiteful like that. But Froch took the piss. Now Superman is back. I'm letting you know, Carl Froch, that your behavior was not cool. By the way, you never would have beaten Joe Calzaghe. Never. He was on a different level. So you need to let that ish go and move on. And somebody tweeted to say, yes, A-Force, give him his character. And Audley replied, he better clap back or I'll know he's gone back to reading another psychology book. Carl Froch, what? You got nothing to say? Talk to me. Somebody then said, trying to troll him obviously, I have it on good authority that Carl Froch knocked you out in sparring. Audley Harrison decided to turn into a teenager with his insult and say, your mum, like he was back in year 10. But then he went on to say, Froch couldn't KO me then, now or forever. He wouldn't dare step to me. He's smarter than that. Somebody else, deciding to praise Audley, wrote fatality. So he said, I'm not sending no doctors. He can bleed out on the floor. I've taken his disrespect personally, and now he's going to feel my wrath. Somebody then said, I'm confused. Did you forget to read the book yourself? Audley said, LOL, I went to the Olympics as a rank outsider, took the event by the balls and made history. I turned pro and had the world under my control until an event happened in 2004 and I lost my strength. Superman left the building. I'll share the story one day in a book or TV show. Now, I don't know what he's alluding to here, but a lot of people were asking what event in 2004, what took place. Obviously, it sounds as very serious, something that I myself would love to know about. What occurred in Audley Harrison's life to make him go off the rails? For all we know, this is just an excuse. Things just didn't go his way. He met his ceiling, right? Or maybe something genuinely did occur which threw him off. But he didn't stop there. He went after more people. Audley went after the boxing press. First, Sports Hub Video approached him and said, can you please give us a follow so we can DM you? And he said, sorry, bud, nope. I'm not doing any DMs this time. The only interviews I'm doing is Kugan Cassius for the Boxing Crew and Kate Garraway or something big for my story. Somebody else said you should go to Sean Atwood, and Audley Harrison said, no disrespect, but that's not big enough for me and my story. Somebody else then said, how about James English? It's a big platform to tell your story. And Audley rather arrogantly replied, for someone who rubs shoulders with royalty, prime ministers, every celebrity you can think of, I think you're very misguided, bud. I'm on a different level even today. Now, James English has done some really interesting podcasts, actually. I've enjoyed a few of them, more than a few of them. But he didn't take too kindly to this at all. He took it as a personal insult and he piped up. He bit up and he said, no disrespect, Audley Harrison, but I only ever interview world champions, so I don't think you'd make the cut. James received a lot of stick for this on Twitter because a lot of people were saying, look at some of the others you've interviewed and stuff like that, and they had a bit of a back and forth between them. And he wrote, who the F are you, James English? I've never heard of you. You internet journalists are too funny. It would be a privilege for you to interview an Olympic champion, MBE, European champ and certified celebrity for many years. Your ego needs to come out of the trash, a joker. Which brings us on to one of his old rivals, and Frank Warren, and we know there's no love lost between these two. Well, these tweets became really saucy. So far, it's just been a bit of disrespect, a bit of banter back and forth. This gets saucy, so follow this through. He wrote, serious question. Does the boxing industry still take Frank Warren seriously? Is he still a factor? Somebody wrote, Frank Warren was always good, stood by his fighters and paid them on time, and then some. Audley, he's been fantastic. Audley said, stop smoking. You obviously don't know boxing or Frank Warren. He's been sued more times than I can remember by boxers. He got shot, and it wasn't for being an angel. He's a snake, who I do actually respect a little because he's a survivor, but he's not honest. Wake up, Tino. And someone else wrote, I think Warren will end up with Sky when it all breaks down with BT. Can't see forward-thinking Amazon dealing with Warren, to be honest. And Audley said, Sky? He's got no chance. He burnt that bridge already. He might have to retire with Emma, his trusted servant for the last 20 plus years, to Portugal or something where he can tell his old boxing stories at the pub. Now, this is somewhat ironic because Audley Harrison has been away in California for a long time, and I'm sure he's been telling a few of his own boxing stories. And listen, there are a number of great boxing stories to tell. Audley Harrison has achieved an awful lot in boxing. Okay, an awful lot, and we'll get to that in a moment, and why I believe this journey is occurring in the mind of Audley Harrison. We'll get to that in a moment. But this gets a lot more saucy with Frank. Somebody messaged to say, you got battered by Martin Rogan, you coward. And he wrote, who was battered by Rogan, you clown? I boxed him on a Frank Warren show and had a few bad rounds, but won the fight quite comfortable. If it wasn't for Frank having the fix in, I remember in the 6th round, I almost had him out. The rematch was a walk in the park. Bum, LOL. Somebody else then said, you are normally viewed as a respected member of the boxing community, but delivering tweets like this is drawing you dangerously close to Jake Paul territory. Hashtag rise above the hate. And Audley Harrison replied, stop with your 2 followers. I don't follow no rules except the ones I create. I'm taking back my crown. Reputation is everything. But I don't worry. The joke Frank Warren and his press bum pals did a good job of stitching me up with their weekly stories. I'm revengeful and coming. Now, I don't know whether there's any truth to this or not. Who knows, right? But with Frank Warren's history of being willing to sue fighters and take them to court, Audley has to be careful with some of the things he says, because unless he's got proof and evidence, got to be a little bit careful here. But this is saucy stuff, man. This is serious stuff. I mean, he's accusing a promoter of fixing the fight. And we can see what's going on at the moment with Crawford and Arum. Things are looking like they could get quite spicy in the boxing world from legal perspectives too. And somebody wrote, I love how Audley Harrison woke up and chose violence in his tweets today. And he wrote, carnage. I truly am using this as my reintroduction to the boxing community. I'm back and they better recognize that it's A-Force they're dealing with, not Audley. Superman has returned. Somebody else wrote, mate, Warren would KO you if you met tomorrow night. Obviously, again, a little bit of meaningless trolling. But he replied, he would smile, that cheesy smile, and look at me through those frog eyes and say, hello, Audley, how you doing? We boxing people are built like that. Well, Audley's got to be careful, because if he's assuming that Frank's just going to take it in his stride, seriously, he has to be careful. But what has led to A-Force wanting all this smoke? What has occurred? What has caused this journey to take place? The truth is, Audley Harrison has achieved quite a lot in boxing. An Olympic gold medalist, a European champion, a 2-time prize fighter winner, which in retrospect, a lot of people look back on and frown upon it or sort of mock it. But the truth is, when Prize Fighter first came out, a lot of people were watching it. So it had some value to it. A lot of people were excited about it, and he won that twice. But people don't tend to remember the achievements. You know, there were a lot bigger named fighters who have never won a gold medal in a European title. You know, an Olympic gold medal is massive, guys. Derek Chisora, Dillian White, these guys haven't achieved these things, and yet they get an awful lot of respect for their achievements. Now, they deserve their achievements and their respect. There's no doubt about it. I'm not trying to suggest that Audley Harrison somehow had a better career than they did. I'm not saying that. But if you're talking about the sheer objective factor of medals and belts and trophies and things like that, he's been very successful. He was a contender for a world title too, even though he fell short. If I was to tell you there's going to be a British heavyweight who's going to come onto the scene, he's going to win an Olympic gold medal, a European championship, win a couple of small tournaments, prize fight tournaments, he's going to fight for a world title, but he's going to fall short, you're going to think, well, okay, this guy's going to have a really good career. But with Audley, that isn't the case. And people don't give him that credit. Why? Because people tend to remember the negative elements. They remember the knockout at the hands of Sprott, Wilder, Price. And hey, he did avenge the Sprott knockout, by the way, and I was at that fight. it was one of the biggest punches I've ever seen live. I was ringside. I was near Spencer Oliver. Spencer Oliver's jaw hit the floor. None of us could believe this shot. It just, he was hurt. He was injured. And it looked like Sprott might be getting him out of there. And it was late in the fight. And he just found this shot, this left hand out of nowhere. But again, people don't really speak about that. They remember the negatives. They remember the fact that, oh, he didn't throw a punch against David Haye. Well, one of the reasons he didn't throw a punch against Haye is not because he wanted to get knocked out. He was hoping to take Haye into the latter rounds. And bear in mind, Haye was low volume too. Now, that's not to say it's an excuse for Audley. He got his tactics wrong, because if you do want to take a guy into the latter rounds to tire him out, you've got to at least make him work in the early rounds. Otherwise, he's just conserving his energy. So Audley got it wrong, but it's not like he stepped in there wanting to get knocked out. But people just feel like there was a cowardice to him, which I feel was a little bit unfair, to be honest. I just feel like his ambition and mouth really didn't match what he ended up doing in the sport. But I felt sorry a little bit for Audley Harrison, but this is what people remember. Now, I want to tell you a little bit of an anecdote to tell you why I believe that Audley Harrison is doing what he's doing right now. Before I do, I have to suggest an alternative. This could just be a mood swing, because Audley Harrison, when he quit boxing, he quit over brain injury fears. And as you can see from this article in the Telegraph, it explains that he'd received punishing blows to the head and the bad news from neurologists, that he'd been left with brain injuries, sight problems, and severe mood swings. And maybe that's what we're seeing tonight. Audley Harrison's just off on one. He's very angry, and he's just decided to get on Twitter and start going after people, right? That could be a possibility. But there's another possibility, and I want to give you a little anecdote of somebody who I knew in real life. This particular guy grew up, and he was known as a very tough guy when we were kids. He would be in fights all the time, to the point where he used to get paid as a teenager to fight in bare knuckle fights. Okay, he was a very tough guy that loved to fight in street settings. He'd be 15 and he'd be having brawls in pubs with grown men. This is the type of guy he was. And so as a result, he had a reputation as a real hard guy. One day when we were about 16, 17, he had a fight with somebody. And this particular fight, I would say, was a draw, essentially. It was a fight in the street. They'd hit each other a few times each. They were both bleeding. They were both pretty solid blows, with neither guy hitting the floor, before it ended up getting broken up. But because he was expected to win this fight, the people in the local neighborhood, people that were standing by, they said he lost the fight. Well, what happened was, back then, for this kid who, in his mind, his reputation was so important to him, they were going to talk about a rematch. And this time they were going to go to this place, which was a concrete football pitch, a wreck, with a cage around it. No one would be around. They were going to fight until one of them was unconscious. They were going to settle the score, right? Well, in the midst of that happening, between then and the fight occurring, he got into some serious trouble with the police. And he was on probation. And I'm not going to go into details, but let me put it this way. Had he broken the law again, what he stood to lose was massive in his life, and he was not willing to take that risk. And so he reneged on turning up for the fight. Now, as you can imagine, in that sort of area, people were calling him a ducker, they were calling him a coward, and that reputation that was so important to him dissipated. Now, he hated the fact that it dissipated, but he couldn't afford to lose what he would have lost. He just really couldn't. So he got on with his life. And a number of years passed, and he seemed to be doing really, really well. And then one day I saw him again, years later. We're talking like a decade after this incident. And he became this, not to me, but in general, he became the most aggressive dude you'd ever seen. He went for 10 years getting his life on track, being a changed man. And then he just became ultra aggressive again, wanting all that smoke from everyone. And once I asked him why he was acting a certain way, and his response to me was something along the lines, I'm paraphrasing, of, people have forgotten who I am and they think they can take the piss. You see, what can happen is, when your identity is tied up with something, it doesn't just have to be fighting, with anything. When that identity that means so much to you is ripped away, and your reputation is no longer what it used to be, like I said, it could be anything. You can hark back to that. And it can end up leaving you very, very bitter and very, very angry. You have to understand the dynamics of what are occurring here. Audley Harrison, like I said, achieved an awful lot. And the majority of people that mock him are people that are fans that may have never even put on a pair of gloves in the ring before. And for those that have put on a pair of gloves, most of them haven't achieved anywhere near to what he's achieved. So Audley will look at fighters like that and he'll think, you little mug, Like, if it weren't for me, you probably wouldn't have got the funding that you got. You haven't achieved anything close to what I've achieved, and you're out here giving it. There comes a point where, I don't know, at his age now, he might be going through that midlife crisis of the things he's achieved in his life and thinking back to who he was, looking at old photographs. His body doesn't act in the same way anymore. He's got these eyesight problems. Who knows what other issues his brain injuries are giving him? Who knows what severe mood swings are affecting his life in what way? And he's looking back and he's thinking, I was that guy once. You remember in Rocky as well? Italian dude is talking to him and he goes, hey, Rock, you remember that guy? And Rocky's looking up to the photograph up in the little gym. That's the point. You look back and you hark back to who you were. And suddenly you don't feel like the same man anymore. And you've got all these guys disrespecting you. Maybe that's what Audley's going through. Now, that's not to say all the people he's giving it to deserve it, of course. But he's just possibly in that mental position right now where he's had enough. There's also the possibility that it's got nothing to do with that. And he just wants to stay relevant. And this is his way of trying to cause up a bit of a stir. And here we are all talking about Audley Harrison, right? Like he said, he is going to release a book. And he wants to have an interview with a big-time channel. Maybe this is his way of trying to catapult himself back into the limelight. Who knows? Or maybe there's a lot more to it. And if there is more to it, let's talk a little bit about Anthony Joshua for a minute. Because there are a couple of parallels here. Both of them are Olympic gold medalists. They were the darlings of British boxing when they came through, the great hopes to become the heavyweight champion of the world for their country. And hasn't Anthony Joshua gone from ultra confident to questioning himself? Now, Audley Harrison never questioned himself per se, but maybe that would explain why he was so cautious after being violently knocked out in the way he was. Maybe that can cause some mental scars. A lot of people are saying Anthony Joshua just needs to go back into beast mode. Just go after Alexander Usyk. Forget the Andy Ruiz fight. It doesn't work like that. Anthony Joshua has given interviews where he seems to be questioning himself, where he doesn't trust his own instinct of invincibility anymore. Maybe that's what Audley Harrison also lost. So maybe there's an element there of a shared torment of a superstar, an Olympic gold medal. The world expects pressure on their shoulders. Yes, Anthony Joshua has had a terrific career, professional career in comparison to Audley. But the journey of the rise and the fall, and then the questioning yourself, and the mockery coming from different quarters around the world, people that you thought were fans, and now all of a sudden fans are mocking you on social media. These things are similar. Well, that brings us on, therefore, to Audley Harrison's tweets about Anthony Joshua. He was asked if he could beat Alexander Usyk in a rematch, and he said he cannot win with this current setup. He's in control. Manny Stewart, Eddie Futch, Angelo Dundee, George Benton, Lou Diva. I was lucky to be taught by Thel Torrance, who was with Futch for 40 years. Not many in the game have been touched by royalty. He needs an adjustment. He went on to say, a serious offer for you, Anthony Joshua and Eddie Hearn. AJ, you're too happy, too content. Usyk, like Lesin over 20 years ago at Sydney, have a style that you need to break down. Talking about you beating him up is not wise. Stop the pride. You know I know. Don't waste time. He was then told by another follower, Audley, what, you want to spar AJ? And this guy was obviously trying to suck up to Audley a little bit. He said, we don't want to see AJ going in there beaten up before he ends up fighting Usyk. And Audley said, stop being dumb. I want to train him. Robert has good schooling. He was with Thel like me, but he's stale when it comes to improving AJ any longer. There are not many teachers left. Most are glorified padmen, limited knowledge of boxing fundamentals. I was fortunate. Audley Harrison, who has been through so many things that he can pass on to Anthony Joshua to guide him to glory. Now, is this just clout chasing? He's got no real experience as a trainer. Is AJ really going to turn to Audley Harrison? Probably not, right? But is this quite an intelligent thing for AJ to do in terms of reaching out to Audley? He reaches out to everybody else. Maybe you'd want to bring Audley in camp, have him there for a week, see what he's got to say. Let me know what you think about all this. What has led to this, I guess you could say, meltdown from Audley Harrison? Why is he turning on everybody? Is it clout chasing? Is it a midlife crisis based on him having enough of people disrespecting him? Is it just a case of him genuinely believing what he says? He's had enough of people and he feels like he can train Anthony Joshua and take him to glory. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, everyone. Chat to you soon.